So what I'm going to ask you to do is do a quick overview of your club, and then we'll get into a bit of it. So starting with Paul, give us a brief overview of your club, what you get up to, and then we'll move around the room.
Okay, so I'm Paul Blake, the owner of Newcastle Eagles and chairman of the foundation. The most part of the club delivery is in the foundation. So the BBL club itself and the WBBL club are both operated by Newcastle Eagles Basketball. All other community work is delivered by Eagles Community Foundation. What does that mean? So the foundation has approximately, I'm going to say 10 full-time community coaches and somewhere in the region of 25 part-time. And within that delivery, we run what I would call 11 fully fledged clubs, the biggest of which has 185 members. And in addition to those 11 clubs, we then run another, I'm going to say 15 at the moment, what we would all call satellite club sites, shall we say, or after school clubs, which are essentially weekly sessions that are about 2 hours. So in essence, just short of 30 sites are club sites in our minds, but the biggest one has got 180 members. Of the 11 that we call fully fledged clubs, the smallest membership is 50. So those 11 clubs have got between 50 and 180 plus members. They all participate in the Eagle Central Venue League, which obviously we operate at our new venue. And on the last run of the CVL, that equated to 92 teams playing weekly. All what I would call junior local league, which I believe is a missing piece for the sport in this country. On top of that, obviously, we run the traditional National League programme. We have 6 National League teams, 2 girls stroke women's and 4 boys stroke men's. So from under 14s to under 23s in Division 3 for the men's. And then up to WBBL and BBL. So that's the system. We run a big primary and secondary school programme that helps to feed the club setup. So you're talking somewhere in the region of 800 to 1,000 young players playing in a club situation every week.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. What about you, Charlotte?
Hi, so I'm at Sussex Bears, and we run community and National League basketball. We've got 16 teams. We enter Basketball Sussex as our local leagues at juniors and senior levels for sort of recreational grassroots sort of development. And then we've got Junior National League from under 12s up to under 18s. We've got, they're mostly boys. We've got an under 14 girls as well. The boys are at Conference and Prem. And then we've got Div 2 men playing in the National League seniors. And this year we've entered Div 3 as well to sort of bridge the gap. We do go into 2 or 3 schools around. We've got wheelchair basketball as well. So we've got 2 or 3 teams at wheelchair. So I think in all we've got 16 teams, about 250 members. That's sort of the size of us.
Brilliant. What about yourself, Liam? You're on mute.
I hear me now. So our club, we have around 150 members based on last season. We have 9 teams, or we had 9 teams. We were expecting 10 or 11 this season, competing all in local competitions. So we start at sort of under 9s through to seniors. We deliver sort of in a handful of primary and secondary schools in the local area, sort of satellites after school, etc. Yeah, and that's pretty much us. We run all of our club activities through two venues. One's a local leisure centre, one's a local school where the club actually started up. Yeah, and that's it. We've grown in sort of 6 years to where we're at, and that's us. I think we've found a bit of a niche in not having National League, if that makes sense. I think in and around the Midlands, there's a lot of National League clubs, and what I've sort of realised in the last few years is not everyone necessarily wants that or wants to commit to that, and I think we've sort of found a bit of a niche in that area. So yeah, I think that's a bit different from the approach a lot of people get, but it seems to work at the moment.
Cool, cheers, Liam. Yeah, it's a good overview of various different clubs. I think you're all three at very different stages. First topic I want to try and get into is basically the junior side of stuff and understanding a little bit more depth what you offer for junior players, both on a participation level and on a competition level. Paul, we'll start with you with the live CBL stuff and kind of the elite side of things as well. So you can give us a brief overview of how your junior setup works.
So I suppose just to add in, as we've all said, the schools element to all of this is ultimately the most important part of the delivery, because that's where we introduce the sport to hopefully a cohort of young people that want to take the sport up. So so first things first, we deliver to just short of 150 schools every year, and the biggest project is Hoots for Health primary school program. It tends to be over 100 primary schools every year that we'll have a close engagement with. We only work with primary schools where there is a distinct exit route to one of our club sites. The whole mandate behind this is a young child shouldn't have to travel more than a mile or two to their local club. I grew up with that in football and cricket. I didn't grow up with that in basketball. I wish I had. I'm talking 30 years ago, so life has changed a little bit, but I was a 12-year-old running around with 40-plus-year-olds in Division 3 of the senior men's local league in Bristol. And I didn't have to do that in the other sports. So my goal in life was to make sure at some point in the future that in terms of what I'm doing, the young people in our area could have that football opportunity, if you like, in basketball. So primary school delivery, promote club exit routes, of which we have, the 11 key clubs that I've talked to you about, plus some other satellite sites. And then at that participation level, same as Liam's attested to there, have a central venue league in place where there is no particular distance to travel to play those games, albeit it is a central venue league and not home and away, because we all know trying to do that on a home and away basis in basketball just sucks up more hours in the hall, which could be training hours. So that was the whole construct 20 years ago. Started with 4 teams in the first central venue league. 20 years later, it's 90 plus. And that is absolutely the most important thing we do as an organisation, full stop. The performance pathway is necessary, important. We run a PPL team, so we have to, make sure we're investing in a pathway up to that ultimate destination in WBBL. We also do some wheelchair basketball too. But the most important cornerstone for the sport in this country is that participation base for me. So that's the route. Schools in distinct areas that are close to the club site that we've set up. The majority of those club sites are in school, secondary school venues that we hire a set number of hours a week in, and then the pathway from participation to Eagles Academy, Eagles National League teams, is a trial situation once a year at the different age groups, whether it be 14s, 16s, 18s, 23s, boys, girls. So that's kind of where it is at the moment.
Through your school stuff, Paul, in particular, do you have any support from external partners or businesses? And my other question would be, your CBL, because they're so big, how are they managed? Are they managed by the foundation, or are they run by volunteers?
So we'll start with the CVL. The CVL is managed by the foundation, and it's part full-time staff, part-time staff, and part volunteer. Obviously, to run something that size takes a significant amount of time and effort, and it's led by our COO Susan Hunter, and also one of the trustees of the foundation, Dave Forrester, who also happens to be Eagles assistant coach. So it's Dave and Susan that drive that project, and one of the ultimate goals of building the building and getting the building open was so that we could have a home for the Central Venue League, which now runs on all 3 courts, all day Saturday and half of Sunday. What comes in off the back of the morning CVL on Sunday is the Bold Eagles, which is the over 45s, 40s really, over 40s.
Do they like being called Bold Eagles? That'd be my other question.
Say again?
Do they like being called the Bold Eagles?
Well, they made it up. It wasn't me. Which in itself is a club. It's I didn't see this one coming, to be honest. A friend of mine suggested it was something that we should do. He took it on, and 12 months later, it's got 150 members. It's incredible. So there's a lot of ex-local league guys and girls that have just sort of fallen away from the sport and don't really want to play in weekly local league competition. Some of them still do. I just want to have a run out on a Sunday morning, and it's great. It's really good.
Awesome. What about yourself at Sussex? Because I've noticed on Facebook you've got your outdoor sessions back up and starting until we get some indoor court space. What's the setup down like at Sussex?
So we're based at out of a school, Gareth Smith's in there doing an academy. So it's at SRWA. So we have a double court there, but then we have to go into external schools, secondary schools with sports halls to try and get enough space. We have done some sort of local competitions with CBL, but it's still hard for us to get venues at any scale and to compete with other sports like badminton, for example, that takes like 1 court, but they're going to take the court all night. So we're still running with that sort of problem because we don't have our own exclusive venue. So I'd say that's one of our biggest hurdles, to try and get court time and venues. And then after that, it would be coaches. But yeah, I expect that's pretty common across all. So we use a variety of places, and at the moment we can only go outside. But yeah, so we still do home and away for lots of our local stuff.
In regards to the home and away stuff, do the juniors like the away aspect of it? If they're running at home, or do they prefer to just play at home and get as many games as possible?
Yeah, we're quite a big county, so we enter the local things into the Sussex League, but it's pre-spread. So there's a central band down the middle of Sussex that most of the away fixtures are at. So no, we're into carpooling and stuff like that to get people to fixtures. So it works, and we're quite lucky that there are enough clubs that are sort of fairly central in Sussex that it gives maybe 10 teams in the league, home and away, so 20 games for a local team. But yeah, we haven't really got that many options because we haven't got a venue that we could hire out to facilitate all of those games. So we are where we are at the minute.
Yes, facilities for basketball clubs isn't always an issue, unless you're in a position where you do have your own facility. It may life a little bit more difficult. And then so a lot of the time, those facilities also need to generate revenue from other areas as well. So I guess we may end up having some events that go on in the venue at times to help generate some income. Okay. Liam, from West Brom's point of view, what about yourself from the junior side of things? I know you're based in an academy. For some new training sessions.
Yeah, so the club was set up. I was working at a school, and the club was set up sort of on the back of that. There was sort of quite a high demand amongst the kids. There was already a lot of interest in basketball, so I delivered in the school, ended up working at the school, and then the club was born on the back of that and become its own standalone. In terms of what we offer for the juniors at our club, we have under 9s through to under 17s competing in the Youth Basketball League, which is based in the Midlands, which is sort of a growing local league, I guess, for juniors. We run on the basis of sort of any kid can come and walk through the door and play basketball. We don't feel that, you know, we're at a level where someone's not good enough to play at our club, and I think that's important. When it comes to sort of league games, competitions, the coach will field the best team that they can naturally, but we sort of have the thing that our doors are open essentially. Anyone that wants to come in can. We do have a good take up from sort of the school delivery that we do. That translate into a lot of kids coming across and sort of actively being members at our club, which is obviously the whole purpose of it. And yeah, the school stuff we do, the delivery once a half term is ideal, but it ends up being once a term pretty much. We get the schools that we're delivering into a local sort of CVR. It's quite, I'd say it's quite relaxed. It's not overly competitive because of the lack of court availability that we've all alluded to. We get them in, we'll have sort of a year group that we focus on each competition, and we might be with the older kids some 3v3s. Fortunately, the venue we use has 8 hoops available, so we run some 3v3s as opposed to sort of full-blown games. I think at that early stage, it's about engagement as opposed to, you know, doing the competition element. Also, to touch on that, in our area, school basketball is pretty poor to say the least. You know, often at competitions there'll be 4 schools turning up, and the kids most of the time will be sort of waiting to play as opposed to actually playing. So we try and just get as many kids playing at the same time and create a bit of atmosphere around the sport as we can. So that's in brief, that's essentially our setup at the moment for our juniors.
There's a common theme between all three around schools, and this is kind of an open question about how, if you're a club and you want to get into a school, not just the facilities, but deliver out of either the curriculum or after school work or those sorts of things, what kind of barriers have you faced as a club trying to get into the school, and then how have you overcome them where you are now? Anyone can jump in.
Yeah, I think we're in just because we've evolved over a 20-year period, and we are in a position where we have a full-time staff base that sell. So we find a way. You know, we build relationships with schools. They have changed somewhat over the years, and they'll continue to change because there will be you know, changes in the way that schools are structured, whether they become academies or trusts or you know, a myriad of different ways that a school can operate in this country these days tends to then present different problems in the way that we can offer the sport to that school. But we have, you know, a very strong, loyal base of schools and teachers in particular that understand, enjoy, and see the benefits of this sport. Obviously, that's a big hurdle to jump because culturally, those teachers may not have seen the sport themselves growing up. So there's an education piece to do as well, which, you know, many years ago we were in a better position with as a sport. You know, early mid 80s maybe. But, that's another story. So so for us, we've just got that not on a voluntary base, but on a you know, a business base ability to just build that project. It wasn't the case when I started out, but we've managed to get to that.
Brilliant. Cheers, Paul. Is anyone else, Charlotte, Lima, anything into that?
I think at the moment at our club we're kind of trying to we're trying to be creative in terms of what we can do with schools that benefits them and ourselves. So obviously we're not at the scale that Paul's alluded to in terms of full-time staff. It's sort of myself and a handful of people trying to facilitate. So a big problem we have is sort of being able to try and be in two places at once with such little staff. But I think, as I say, we're trying to explore creative options like offering a school as opposed to sort of paying us or getting funding to deliver, offering them perhaps free sessions in return for some court time to run maybe satellites or club activities. So that's something we're trying to explore. Obviously, working with schools isn't always easy, and it does present some barriers, but the schools we're in, I think, are happy to try and work on new things that benefit both. So yeah, that's us with schools. As I say, our club was grown in a school, so we've saw firsthand sort of the barriers that come with working with schools as well. So that's it.
What about from Sussex Bears' point of view, Shah?
Yeah, so myself, I'm in a school, and some of the other coaches are in schools. But as you say, the delivery of it, they all want you to come along at 3 o'clock or whatever. So it's hard to manage that without paid coaches, and we're not quite at that level. So I think some of the options that, you know, as you've said, are like the taster sessions, or maybe you can go into a school for a series of 6 sessions or something like that to try and build up some interest. But that's what we've tried so far. So I've gone into some schools. I don't know if Paul, have you benefited from the primary school funding? Is that how you're doing so many for the primary schools?
Yeah, and equally, so long story short, secondary school delivery of basketball is extremely patchy, as I think we would all agree, and very, very much down to the senior heads of PE and what their interests are. So you could spend a long time trying to persuade, teachers at that starting point. And equally, kids have probably formed, in the most part, their own decisions as to what sports they want to play. So we always decided that we would start, 20 years ago, we decided we would start at primary school level, 10, 11-year-olds, engage them in the sport, and regardless of what their experience then is when they move to secondary school, we're trying to retain them through the club pathway, and not relying on the delivery of basketball in secondary schools. Just too much to try and deal with. So primary schools we've found consistently are more receptive. To that extent now we're reaching down to under 8s. We're starting at under 8s. We've found that starting at under 12s now is too late. Which we have other sports to thank for that, but that's fine. It is what it is, and equally the other thing we're finding with that is the input of the parents of under 8 kids is, and it's at a great level at under 12s, but at under 8s, it's at an unreal level. They're, really, really super engaged, want to get involved in all parts as volunteers, take the kids absolutely everywhere they want to go. So that's worked really well for us. Our biggest cohort in the CVL is under 8s. So primary school, to answer your question, primary schools, primary school premium, building relationships with the teachers in those schools and offering a consistent product. So our consistent product just happens to be the project we call Hoops for Health, and it includes delivery from the BBL players and the WBBL players as role models. So that does help the sale, clearly.
That was also
yeah. So did you do that? Sorry, we all spoke together.
No, go ahead.
Do you do that during the school day? And is it like a course of sessions that you give, or do you do it after school, or? It's
afternoons, so it's 1 p.m. to 3:30 So it comes in different stages. We do a roadshow afternoon. That's the bit the players are involved with, talking about healthy living subjects. We then go back in with the community coaches and deliver a block of coaching. And that block of coaching is to prepare the children in that cohort for a festival tournament day for that particular council. And we work across 6 councils. That makes sense. So Newcastle,
Right.
Gateshead, North Tyneside, South Tyneside, Sunderland, and Northumberland. They all have their own tournaments, the primary schools that we work with in those distinct councils. And you get a final 4 from each tournament. They come and play semi-finals and finals at an Eagles game, finals at half-time. So we get a winner for every council, and then we bring all 6 council winners back for a champion of champions every year, and we've done that now for 20 years. So it's just built its own reputation over a very long period of time. No two ways about it. It was super difficult the first 2 or 3 years, and we struggled. But we did have the benefit of the fact that I was trying to get a BBL franchise off the ground at the same time. So we were operating as a business. There was no two ways about it. It was going to succeed, by hook or by crook. But the whole project, including the BBL team, was only ever going to succeed with the grassroots program growing. It would have folded years ago otherwise. I don't have any problems telling anybody that the BBL club would have folded. I took it over in '99. It would have folded by 2003-04 if we hadn't engaged in the grassroots activity and really properly invested in it.
Mhm.
Just building a playing market and a market that might be interested in coming to watch games at the same time.
I picked up something you said there as well about use of role models, and that can happen within any club. So I'm interested to hear from everyone about how they use role models within their club to inspire the young people. So whether that's someone playing on the senior team, doesn't necessarily have to be National League or anything like that, but actually, do you use those individuals to help inspire the young people within the club? Liam, you look like you have to say something. There we go.
I was going to say, I think at our club, I think obviously we're on quite a small scale, but I think the beauty of what we've done is a lot of the coaching staff actually came from within, so they're young people that sort of I worked with initially when it was just myself and a group of 10 kids. There's sort of 3 or 4 of our coaching staff that we've built within, and although between age groups they don't see each other that often, I think what we've found success with is sort of identifying sort of mid to late teens and trying to mold them to understand that you can be involved in basketball. The chances of you being a basketball player, a professional basketball player, are very, very slim. There's other ways to stay in the sport for life. So I think that's kind of what we do. With our coaches, we've got a couple of them that work at the school that we run our sessions from. So we have positive role models, not on the sort of level of they're going to watch a professional game and see them making spectacular plays, but in their own right and in our own rights, we do have a lot of positive role models. And I think the kids seeing other young people coaching, leading, helping out with this, helping out with that, I think is really important, sort of as I say, to build lifelong participation, but also to ensure the sustainability of the club and the program.
Cool. What about you, Charlotte?
Yeah, I think as we all try, we've got positive role models in the club, and as you've said, it's again from Sussex Bears, we're a relatively small operation, so we haven't got an enormous amount of people who are going to be very successful within basketball, going to college or EuroLeague or wherever, to inspire young people. But we've got lots of positive role models that have done for not just the basketball, but also like life skills and how they were really keen, and then at 16 they realized that they're not going to be professional basketball players in the NBA, but look, they've gone to college and they've done this, and then they've come back and helped us. So we've got we're lucky enough to be in an area where we have had players go through, and then they've become like probably you said, Liam, you know, then they've come back to coach. So there is a pathway through that people can see that isn't just, you know, the be all and end all if you're going to make a professional basketball player. It's about lots of other avenues open for you. And we're based primarily at school. So it's all about that, you know, engagement in what they're doing as well, and where they're going to go to, you know, stay on at sixth form. And, you know, basketball is encouraging a lot of these kids to come and be committed to something. So it's not just, you know, the achievement level. It is that, you know, we're going to offer you training before school, and then, you know, the carrot, rather than hopefully that then they will engage in the school system and commitment and dedication to things, that sort of thing. So it's a little bit broader perhaps than just the basketball.
I think with all of our basketball clubs, I think it's easy to underestimate the impact individuals within this have on those young people's lives. You know, I think there's some clubs that it's an outlet for them, and it gives them an opportunity to express themselves, and actually they may be better during basketball than their academic study, that how they're inclined, but then they may take that hard work and effort from the basketball into their studies. So for me, I never underestimate what the power of a club can do, particularly for the young people.
Sorry, I think I've got the time lag, but I you know, we, as I think some of you were saying, like, we had an outdoor sessions this week, and some of the parents were going, actually, we didn't know how down some of our children were until they actually got a session back, you know, playing outside. And they said, actually, I thought he was perfectly happy, but he's come home and he's so much happier. And, you know, yeah, it's, you know, how important it is to them, even if they're not at an elite level. It's an outlet for them, isn't it? So, you know, quite important through those teenage years to keep them engaged.
I think one of the difficulties we have as a sport, in sport in general, is celebrating that, because people are so busy doing the on the ground work and delivering and those sides of things, and sometimes you need to step back and celebrate that and kind of show off what we do. I think sometimes that's a bit of a difficult thing to do, because you're always getting on to the next thing. So have you guys kind of being able to display that kind of impact that you have, whether that's by just purely saying you've increased memberships, or one-off stories and case studies about these individuals, those sorts of things?
Yeah, I mean, we make a big point of it, but again, if you've got staff to do it, and it's much harder to do that if it's volunteers doing it. And we've got the ears of the local press and radio and TV as well, so that all helps. But I think social media is the key with that, though, isn't it? In terms of making sure your community-based messages and your club messages are all getting out, not just to the basketball community that you're working with, but extended out from that. I'm pretty sure this will be the case with you two as well. We seem to be in Newcastle somewhat the nemesis of the football club, because consistently over a number of years we've done the right thing in the community, and that's not necessarily the case with our friends across the road. So we've built up a massive amount of goodwill. I mean, they're doing things very well as well now, to be fair to them, but there was a period where they weren't, and basketball just resonates that way. It really does, you know, and that's enabled us to build quite a big network. I think it does all come back as well to what size do you want to be, because, you know, all three of us are big clubs. You know, 250 members, 150 members, that's a big club. No two ways about it, and it's kind of deciding, well, how big do you want it to be? Do you want to double again, or is it great where it is now? You know, it's all about sustainability, isn't it? For the good of the sport, we've got to be sustainable first.
I think a lot of clubs want to expand, but then again, it's the workforce behind it. And at the end of the day, 99% of people within basketball are volunteers. You know, everyone tends to have day jobs and stuff like that, and it's just a hobby for a lot of people. And it's kind of understanding that and not burning those people out as well, I think, sometimes. because we'll have individuals within the basketball community that are players, they're coaches, and by the way, they referee, they table officiating, those sorts of things. But it's very difficult to find people sometimes, particularly around the refereeing and officiating involved. Moving on very slightly from the moving away from the junior section, what do you guys offer for the seniors? Whether that is the Bold Eagles or whether you're entering national league teams, those sorts of things. Liam, what do you offer for the senior side of things?
So we started our first senior team probably, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago now. The junior stuff, we started with juniors, as we probably all did, and that was so successful that sort of guys that I'd known throughout the years started asking, you know, are you going to put a team in, blah blah blah. So I did that, and it was sort of a close group of guys that I'd played with at some point. Now we offer sort of, I think we had four men's teams and a women's team last year, just at various levels really. So we had an under-23s team competing in the YBL. We had we called it our men's development team, also competing in the YBL. So that was people that were either sort of moving up from under-17s or people that were sort of new to basketball, wanted to try and play in a team and play a bit, you know, a bit more structured basketball. And then we had a Division 2 team and a Prem team competing in the West Mids Basketball League. You guys might have saw we work alongside Just Play as well. So that was set up with the view of having people being able to access a friendly basketball session where the level you're at is, you know, not too important. We didn't want anyone to feel out of place, and that kind of evolved into us being able to facilitate so many men's teams. As I say, I feel like we found a bit of a niche in what we do, in terms of not everybody wants to sort of be committed to working out sort of daily and things like that, and they want to play structured and they want it to be competitive when they're there, but at the same time they don't want it to sort of or perhaps they can't have it be something that they sort of dedicate their daily life to, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think we've done a good job of facilitating different levels, and that's where we're at.
Cool. What about you, Charlotte, Sussex?
Yeah, so we have got a men's senior in our local league and a women's senior in the local league, and then we've got Div 2 in the National League. So yeah, so our local men are from around the area and play juniors for various clubs and stuff, and then they train once a week and they play in the local league. And then we've got the Div 2, and then we've got our under 18s. We've got in the school in the ABL, and then we've got a division, a conference division under 18s as well. So this year we've entered the Div 3 to try and give them a bridge between the 18s and the Div 2, trying to keep. We sort of lose some of the juniors sometimes. They go off to college, or they, you know, and then they don't actually make it to the men. So our local league men are sort of older men. I'm sure they don't want me to say they're over 40, but you know, it's the older one. So we've got the gap between the 18s and the 35s, maybe. You know, so sorry.
Are they bold?
Are they old? Did you say?
Old.
Not sure you comment.
So yeah, that's what we're trying to do. It's difficult. I think, as Liam was saying, is that some people want different things. That, you know, like we've got quite a lot of players. The local league, we've only got one local league men's team, but during the summer normally we would run sessions, and there would be a lot of people on 2 courts. So we might have up to 30 men doing that, but because of the age that they are and they're having children and that sort of stuff, they don't all want to commit to doing a league. But so through the summer sort of term and through the summer holidays, we might have up to 30, but we only enter one league, home and away, in the local league for them. And then women, we have a women's team. We've only had it for about 3 years now, and they play in a local league as well. But there's only about 5 women's other teams in our area to play against, so that's slightly limiting. And then that's quite a big step up to National League for them. We haven't really got the base, so for women we've gone back to under 14s, juniors, and then hopefully we're going to then pull them through to have more of a women's base in the club as well.
Cool. What about yourself, Paul?
Yeah, so the network of clubs that we've set up, the majority of those that started at under 12s have grown through 14s, 16s, 18s, and then into senior local league. So the majority of the 11 clubs have got 1 or more teams in the senior local league, which is the Time Met League. So that's kind of the way that we work with that. But we don't operate or run the Time Met League. That's a local area association. So it's absolutely important for us to see that league remain strong, and that there's a definitive link between the central venue league, if you like, and pathway through to senior men's predominantly local league. Need to have a growing senior women's local league as well. Same as Charlotte, it's not, the number of clubs in the region for in the women's local league is not what it should be, and we're doing what we can to help with that position from a younger age with the women's development officer, and we're trying to actually separate out from the CVL. We've had one in the past to have a girls only central venue league. We had one a few years ago, lost the funding and had to start again. So that's an area of work for us, no question at all. I think we've got about 200 girls playing, but they need to be playing in their own local competition first before they move up into the National League programme, or the talent, the most talented move up, and then Bold Eagles.
In regards to the older generation and the Bold Eagles and those side of things, how has that developed over the past few years? I think the principle of walking basketball has only kind of emerged in like the kind of last 10 to 5 years sort of thing. And certainly where I live, near Coventry, there's walking basketball going on, those sorts of things. So you guys, how have you come across the walking basketball? Paul.
Sorry, I missed the end of the question there, Sam.
So how have you guys developed the walking basketball side of things?
Well, so the walking basketball, we've been in and out of a little bit, but there's definitely a market there. It's just back to capacity really, and now we've got the venue. It's something that we want to spend more time on. The venue has an over 55s officer, so he's been delivering. Although the Bold Eagles Club is separate to his work, he's been delivering walking basketball activity for the older generation in the local community around the venue. I think that's got a long way to go. I think that could be growing exponentially, no question. It works really well with the older generation that we're working with, who've never picked up a basketball in their lives. And they love it. They absolutely love it. But it's not big for us at the moment. It's something that we want to grow into. It's always back to capacity though, isn't it? And coaches and hall space.
Yeah, that comes right on to my next question is, where do you guys as club want to go in kind of the next couple of years? Whether you're kind of capacity or volunteers and workforce to help deliver some of the stuff you want to do, or you've already put in motion some plans that you might want to run next year that have never happened before. So I'm kind of interested to see clubs in various different stages where you're looking to go next. So Liam, start with you.
Yeah, I think for us, it's we're definitely sort of in terms of where we're at as a club, we definitely run on what I'd say is cost effective. Like I've heard of a lot of people that are so passionate about basketball where running the club ends up like draining their personal finances, which obviously is just never sustainable, no matter how much passion we have. So for us, I think we're at a stage where paid coaching, next step is to be able to develop opportunities. Say paid coaching, it's just to develop the sport and the club, but obviously it's very hard to keep coaches engaged when, you know, at most you can offer them an after school club, you know, when they have to go and earn a living. So, you know, ours is just to, I'd say, be able to develop more part-time or even full-time positions where it's financially viable for people to help develop basketball and help develop the club. As I say, goodwill is great. Volunteers are great. Obviously, they make the sport and our clubs what they are, no doubt. But I think for us, it's a case of getting maybe one or two, as I say, more full-time or part-time staff to be able to really strengthen what we already do. We deliver good stuff. We have really good relationships with the schools that are in there, very loyal to us and vice versa. But I think we just need to find a way of making it more financially viable and more significant, really.
Cool. What about yourself, Shad? You said you're going to the Div 3 national team as well, which is in itself a handful. Is there anything else as well that you're looking to do at Sussex?
We're trying to solve the problem of venues. You know, that's our biggest issue. We just haven't got enough court time. So there's quite a lot of interest in the area for developing more teams and stuff, but we just haven't got any space to put them. So we're in ongoing, as ever, negotiations with people about that. So that would be our biggest breakthrough, really. And then on top of that, as Liam was saying, we're caught between trying to keep it reasonably priced for a mass audience and lots of people for community basketball, but on the other hand, we need to keep hold of the volunteers and staff we've got and coaches. So we have decided this year that we're going to have to start offering you know, expenses and stuff to people to try and keep hold of that goodwill that we've started building up. So yeah, it's in this world and this September, it's difficult to know how we're going to progress that, because lots of venues around us are our local leisure centre to our court has gone into administration in the last week, and so that's going to put more pressure on all of the court time for everybody else. So, but yeah, the biggest thing is the venue. If we could have more access to a venue more regularly, it would give us a lot more opportunities to raise funds. But yeah,
It's a trip to Newcastle might be a bit too far for borrowing some legals time.
yeah.
What about yourself, Paul? Also from a foundation, but also from a commercial business point of view as well, on the BBL side of things.
Well, we're obviously going through this early phase of the building's been open for 18 months now, and obviously the last 5 not operational. So we're still learning how to run a building, and equally that's brought a third element into the business. If the first one is Eagles, the second one is foundation, the third is events in the venue to cover the costs of the venue and everything else we do. So the first point is we've just got to get better in that. Food and beverage offering and all of this sort of stuff. Of course, hospitality, businesses using the rooms, the hiring for, you know, we've had boxing events, we've had trade shows, etc., etc. So it's become a rather complicated business, if that makes sense, but it's all there to aid basketball, and that's the biggest difference maker. Whatever the building generates, the money goes back into the foundation to further push the aims of the foundation, which is to grow basketball, and it's a home for the club. So we're not particularly in this environment when it's just so unpredictable. You know, we're shut today. We don't know when we're going to reopen. We all know what the lack of indication right now is quite galling. Theatre's open August the 1st, but I have a theatre, which is my basketball venue. I think that's a theatre personally, and we're not allowed to open. Theatres are paying 5% on tickets, VAT from now on. We're still paying 20. I fail to understand the difference. So there's some lobbying going on there, but I think for now, our goal is to just get back to where we were and make sure it's all still sustainable. It's all going to be very unpredictable. I'm still pretty positive that we can find a way through all of this. We don't have the complication of necessarily in trying in having to find venues, and so Charlotte's alluded to the fact that there are indoor venue providers that are in significant trouble right now. Equally, we do still hire nearly 30 venues a week for the clubs that we run. So we've got a different issue in each one of those. So for me, it's just growth isn't on the agenda right now. Sustainability is. Just getting back to where we were is the key.
Yeah, I think it's the same with a lot of clubs, in that actually at the moment it is a worrying time with the COVID situation and the worry of whether things. And I think the kind of feedback that I've been getting, a lot of people are chomping at the bit to get into basketball, but then there's all sorts of different variables and lockdowns and all sorts of things, and the Charles alluded to things like venues and stuff, and quite a lot of plans. So it's going to be a bit of a turbulent year, and trying to put in measures to try and help the facilities and those sorts of things, and lobby within Basketball England whatever we can do to try and get games and competition back on as well. Just one final one from everyone really is kind of one or two top tips to give to people about how you've got to where you are, kind of what you've learned on your journey to the point you're at now, so that clubs can take it away and go, actually, I think we can do that, and expand and develop themselves. So, Liam, starting with you. I'm very puzzled.
Always. I think from my point of view, when I sort of started investing a lot more time into the club and looking at making it something much bigger and much more sustainable, definitely sort of, how can I say this? For me, the element of basketball over the last few years has become secondary. Applying for funding, etc. Funders, let's be honest, they don't care about basketball. They care about what basketball does for people. So I think, definitely sort of networking with people in the area that can either provide funding or direct you to places where funding is applicable. But yeah, over the last few years, the biggest thing that I've probably realised for clubs, at this kind of level, sort of a local league or maybe a junior national league club, is sort of finding ways to get finance behind what you're doing, because I'm sure we've all saw a lot of clubs, good clubs in their own right, but just not be able to sustain what they do. So as I say, we're all passionate about basketball, but without any finance behind it, it just can't happen. So as I say, just ways of getting external funding in would be mine.
What about you, Charlotte?
Similar, I think, because we all struggle so much for income, isn't it? But so I think we've tried to throw our net a bit wider than the normal basketball community that we sort of are quite narrow in. So instead of it just being the players that once played and now do a bit of coaching, we've got to sort of open up to a wider market than that. And so, we've involved in the last 2 or 3 years. We've gone for the wheelchair route as well, which helps a lot with funding, and then trying to get into women's side and girls' side to try and get hold of, the This Girl Can and things like that. So I think a wider net maybe than just a narrow basketball. We need to involve the people who didn't grow up playing basketball, but actually this is a really engaging sport for your son or your daughter, or come and watch us on a Saturday night. So it's trying to get that, I think, a bit broader market.
Brilliant, excellent. What about yourself, Paul?
Well, ultimately, you can't grow a club without a workforce. So a solution to finding and retaining coaches is key. And I'm not saying for 1 second we've solved that. We haven't, because over 20 years we've had a consistent turnover of coaches. But we keep working on coach recruitment consistently. I think, and I'll always say this, I think it's got to be participation first before performance. For the good of the sport nationally, we are supposed to be a mass participation sport, and you won't achieve that goal by performance only. You have to have a big, wide participation base. So, and that participation base can become a significant network, because the kids that are playing have parents that are working in different businesses. A lot of sponsorship these days is really pledge, corporate social responsibility. I know a lot of rugby parents that put money into rugby just because they love rugby. They don't necessarily get a return for their business from what they're doing, but that's their life. They'd rather spend the money there than buy a flashy car or whatever it might be. So we need to breed a bit of that in basketball, I think. And the bigger the network you have, the better opportunity you have, which would sort of lead to the last thing for me is, your opportunity. We all ultimately need money to make these things work, because you've got to pay for venues, and to an extent, coaches need to be paid, etc., etc. So, where does that money come from? For us, it's subscriptions, it's sponsorship, and it's grants. 15 years ago, grants was the top of the list. It's now the bottom, because it's significantly harder to raise and find those pots than it was in the 2000s. So those are the keys for me. Workforce and where is the financial resource coming from.
That draws nicely to the end of the hour-long discussion. I just want to say thank you on behalf of Basketball England and myself. It's great to get the points of view from people that are working within the clubs and on the ground doing these things. And this will be a part of some of the information that I can then utilise in some resources for clubs and those sorts of things, just to ensure that best practice is seen across the basketball community, but actually also used at the same time. So on behalf of the EE and myself, thank you very much for taking part. Thank you.